Okay, the saving of Crowder's Mountain in Gaston County, Gastonia, North Carolina. I'm very proud that in 1971, when I was a 19-year-old student at Gaston College in Dallas, a member of the Ecology Club, I was fortunate enough to be part of a big effort to keep a treasure, a geological treasure, Crowder's Mountain, from being strip mined for kyanite. And that story is told in 3 pages briefly in the April issue of Our State magazine. And I'm interviewed throughout the article. I'll show you this. This is our Gaston College Ecology Club on October 30th, 1971 at Dixie Village, just before we started marching 4 miles from Dixie Village to the Linwood Road entrance. Well, it wasn't an entrance then, but it was where you could get into the mountain. It wasn't a parking lot then of Crowder's Mountain. What it was, there were efforts we had found out to strip mine Crowder's Mountain, which would have ravaged the mountain just like Henry's Knob 15 miles away in Clover, South Carolina, York County, South Carolina. And I had just joined the Ecology Club. Let me show you me, if you can. That's me there, described as a 19-year-old slouching hippie, decked out in full Creedence gear, dressed like John Fogerty of Creedence Clearwater Revival with all the long hair. This is Marlene. At the time she was sexton. She was a member of the club who encouraged me to join the club. This is our leader, Ralph Brown, holding the Earth's Last Stand March Begins Here. He was threatened with a gun the week before this photo was taken. And this is Judy. She was Judy Scruggs back then, and Judy Scruggs Davis now, and she is the sister-in-law of Marlene. But I had joined the Gaston College Ecology Club, and not long afterwards we found out that there were plans to strip mine Crowder's Mountain. And Ralph Brown, our leader, knew that that would be a devastating destruction of the mountain. So he put together this march. But first of all, let me explain a little bit of how it came about. A friend of Crowder's Mountain, if ever there was one, David Cohn, had just been released from the Marine Corps. And he was taking a hike up the backside trail of Crowder's Mountain in about 1971, and he saw men with surveying equipment. And he asked, "What are you doing?" And one of the men said, "Well, we're surveying. They're going to strip mine Crowder's Mountain." And David became absolutely livid. He ran down the trail and went to his father, Richard Cohn. And Richard Cohn said, "Oh, no, they're not going to strip mine that mountain." So Richard Cohn took photographs of Crowder's Mountain in its natural state and Henry's Knob after it had been ravaged by the strip mining process, which ended in 1970. And Richard Cohn would show these photographs, these slides, to groups wherever he could get an audience, women's groups, I think city councils, county commissioners, anywhere he could get an audience together and say, "We don't want this to happen to beautiful Crowder's Mountain." And he organized the Gaston County Conservation Club. And some members of that club were Fred and Kay Moss, who had the Moss Drugs in Gastonia, Moss Drug Pharmacy. George Ball, my biology teacher at Gaston College. Judge Louis Bullwinkle, various other people. And they were older people in the Conservation Society. We were younger people, college students. We thought they were all a bunch of rich old men. And they called us the young and the restless. We called them the old and the breathless. We knew about the existence of each other, and that each one of us, each group, was working to stop the strip mining. But we did not know, we didn't actually work together, as a team or as a unit. But when Richard Cohn was not available to show the slides, the photographs, George Ball would do it, or Judge Louis Bullwinkle would do it. So many people were involved in this wonderful, dedicated effort. And Ralph Brown, our leader, and let me tell you a little bit about Ralph. I think Ralph was born in York County, South Carolina, and I think he spent a lot of years out in California. He was a bona fide California hippie. And I think he had met and talked to Bob Dylan at one time many years ago in San Francisco. So he had all kinds of hippie credentials that we really respected and admired. But Ralph was adamant that there would be no strip mining of that beautiful mountain. In fact, he told me, he put his hand on my shoulder, he said, "Bob, they're not going to strip mine that mountain." He said, "If they take that mountain, I'm lying down in front of a bulldozer, they'll take me with it." And nobody even thought about doubting Ralph Brown's sincerity in making that statement. As a matter of fact, what led to the march, October 30th, 1971, was Ralph was at home in Kings Mountain, North Carolina, the previous Sunday, and a man in a truck pulled up in his yard, got out, knocked on Ralph's door. Ralph went to the door, and he opened it and he said, "May I help you?" And he said, "You Ralph Brown?" Ralph said, "Well, yes, sir, may I help you?" He said, "You to Ralph Brown causing so much fuss about that mountain." Ralph said, "Well, we want to see it saved. We don't want it strip mined and ruined." The man had a beer can in one hand and a pistol in the other. And he said, "I'm going to tell you something, Mr. Brown. You keep on about that mountain." And he threw the beer can up and shot at it. Ralph said he missed it. He said, "That gave me a little hope." But he said, "You keep on about that mountain, they're going to find you dead on it." And turned around and walked off and got into the truck and drove off. And Ralph said, "Okay, they want to play hardball." And he told me the next day at Gaston College, "Bob, we're having a march from Dixie Village to Crowder's Mountain, 4 miles, next Saturday morning. Be there if you can. We're going to protest the intention to strip mine the mountain." Before Crowder's Mountain was bought by the state of North Carolina, it was owned by, I think, 3 families. It was LPT Holding Company, and I think it was Peaches, Levantis, and Tracus. And they would let people use the mountain as a park. They could use it, hike, camp, whatever they wanted to do on it. The only difference was there were no rules or policies or, time limits. You didn't have to be out by a certain time or anything like that. Although I would imagine that being the owners of that mountain and allowing people to use it would entail a good bit of liability if somebody should get injured or killed. But anyway, that's what triggered the determined effort to make this public. And Ralph made it absolutely unmistakable that that mountain was going to be saved. Ralph was, I believe, a Taurus by astrological sign, which is an earth sign, and through the years he called himself the Earth. Whenever he would send me an email, which was about once a year, a holiday, he would put, "I am the Earth." So Ralph was very much a part of saving Crowder's Mountain. And I remember there was something else going on at that time. Crowder's Mountain was not the only geographical location that had my attention at that time. When the picture was made, that was in Our State magazine and the Gastonia Gazette, of our group before we marched, I had received a notice from the Selective Service that my 2S student deferment would expire, had expired October 17th, 1971, and the President of the United States could send his greeting at any moment. And President Nixon at that time made it perfectly clear that he wanted me for Uncle Sam's Vietnam Adventure Club. As it turned, and I was thinking about that as well, and I do remember thinking, I hope we get this mountain saved before the greetings from the President of the United States comes. But as it turned out, I had a high lottery number and did not have to concern myself about, maybe going to Vietnam for the Vietnam War there. But a lot of things were going on at that time, and it was a very interesting time. And I will say this, there was one state park official who put his career and his retirement on the line to get the funding for Crowder's Mountain to become a state park. Judy Scruggs, now Davis, and some friends spent some nights camping on Crowder's Mountain in an effort to witness the mining company test drilling on the mountain. I don't think they ever witnessed it, but that was the extent of their dedication. That was their extra contribution. I didn't do that much. I marched, I talked about it, I helped circulate petitions, but there were so many people who did so much more, like Ralph Brown, Richard Cohn, and George Ball, and Judge Louis Bullwinkle, and the Mosses. So many people did so much to help save that mountain. And I talked to a man many years ago up on the summit of Crowder's Mountain. He overheard me telling someone about that. He said, "Were you part of that?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I was too." And he said that at the time I met him, that he lived in Anderson, South Carolina, but at the time he lived near Crowder's Mountain. He said, "I helped with that." He said, "My friends and I sabotaged their equipment." So there was a lot that went on. One thing that went on that I'm really not at liberty to divulge, but I will say that there was so much that went on in bringing about the decision of the mining company to, well, we're not going to strip mine Crowder's Mountain. Now, I have also heard that the mining company determined that there was not enough kyanite or barite that they wanted to mine to make it worth their while. So I don't know, it was either our efforts or the fact that there wasn't enough kyanite barite there. But the main thing is Crowder's Mountain was not strip mined. And then it was bought by the state of North Carolina and became a state park. So I consider it one of the most important, I'll say the most important thing that I've ever done in my life. And one of the reasons that I like to go up there so much is there's one scene that I've seen played out a number of times, like a little child will break away from his mother and father and dash up the steps the backside trail steps to the summit of Crowder's Mountain. And then when his eyes first get a glimpse of the beauty of that overlook, the child would yell, "Whoa, Mommy, Daddy, hurry. You can see the whole world." And it's just a glorious experience, I'm sure, for that child and for the child's parents and for me to observe that kind of excitement. And you have to wonder if the Gaston College Ecology Club, the Gaston County Conservation Society, and all the other folks who got together and said, "No, you're not strip mining this mountain," would that child have had that experience? Would the child at that point in his childhood have been treated to that kind of majestic view and excitement? And there have been some funny experiences too. I know there was a family came up there, and a young teenage girl, she had I guess a bratty little brother, and the parents and little brother came up, and the little boy got probably too close to the edge for her satisfaction, and she shouted out, "Mother, Aaron is standing precariously close to the edge." And I thought that was amusing. But there have been so many wonderful experiences up there. I've met so many people. I met a man up there some years ago who was had retired from his job in New York as producer for Morley Safer, CBS 60 Minutes. And he overheard me talking, and he said, "By any chance were you in broadcasting?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "I was too." He said, "I was Morley Safer's producer." And you just never know who you're going to meet up there or what kind of experiences you're going to have. There have been, of course, some tragedies. There have been people who have accidentally fallen